look, we're not going to let him go too crazy, Elon, with the oil and gas stuff. And, because Robert F. Kennedy cares more about human beings and health and the environment than anybody. And he's going to be absolutely, having him is such a great honor. I've been friends of his for a long time. And I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines.
Looks like Donald Trump is keeping his promise because the president-elect is going to allow RFK Jr. to go wild on health. He has tapped RFK Jr. as the potential head of Health and Human Services, so the HHS secretary, should he be confirmed. And he made his announcement via social media, writing, quote, "I am thrilled to announce Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the US Secretary of Health and Human Services. For too long, Americans have been crushed by the industrial food complex and drug companies who have engaged in deception, misinformation, and disinformation when it comes to public health. The safety and health of all Americans is the most important role of any administration, and HHS will play a big role in helping ensure that everybody will be protected from harmful chemicals, pollutants, pesticides, pharmaceutical products, and food additives that have contributed to the overwhelming health crisis in this country. Mr. Kennedy will restore these agencies to the traditions of gold standard scientific research and beacons of transparency to end the chronic disease epidemic and to make America great and healthy again." Before we get to more on this story, I have to pause and just make a general comment about Donald Trump's social media posts. I can't say this about every post that we've been seeing from him, but I have noticed that he's kind of reining it in a little bit when it comes to, like, at least when it comes to who he announces for his, secretaries and cabinet picks.
Yeah, you mentioned this earlier in the week. I think that a staffer is writing those official ones,
yes.
Right? So that's why it appears that as a fake appearance of reining it in, that brother cannot be reined in. Okay, he'll be out in the wild very soon.
No, I totally get it, but yeah, I think it's good that he's letting a staffer write these.
I hear, but it's not going to last. So, but on Kennedy, I have a lot of strong thoughts. So first off, I really hope they have a real hearing. And what I mean by that is, Bobby Kennedy was on the show. You should go check out that interview on Young Turks on YouTube. And it was a really interesting conversation. We agreed and disagreed in parts. And the part that I disagree with him on is the part he got put in charge of. Oops, oh well. It is what it is, that's right, we lost, they won, right? And I don't agree with him on that, but I do agree with him on a bunch of other things. I've said him 100 times, great on housing, great on corruption, etc. But what I wanna do is, I don't wanna have hearings about dead bears and brainworms and whales. Okay, we know all that, we got it, right? So I want them to have a real hearing about the substance. Like, okay, so this brother's got points about pesticides. Well, that's interesting. I kind of want to hear that one out, right?
Right.
Seed oil, vaccines, etc. Well, if you guys are all 100% sure that he's wrong, great. There's a perfect opportunity in these hearings to prove him wrong, okay? So I hope that they choose a tiny bit of substance. And I got to tell you my experience with this, because I knew him a little bit before any of this. And 9 years ago, he asked me, hey, can you arrange a debate on vaccines on the Young Turks? And I tried, and I went and looked and asked a lot of people that are scientists, etc., because I'm on their side, right? But I'd moderate, I'd be fair. I couldn't find one person, and they said, no, we refuse to discuss it. Well, now they're going to be forced to discuss it. And guys, stop saying you refuse to discuss things. If you're right, which I think you are right in this case, go make your case.
I totally agree. Now, let's talk a little bit about what he would be in charge of, like what his duties would be should he be confirmed as the HHS secretary. So this department oversees quite a bit, including the FDA, CDC, National Institutes of Health, which funds a lot of the research and development for pharmaceutical companies, Medicare and Medicare service programs, AKA many smaller agencies that fall under the umbrella of HHS. Now, since Election Day, Kennedy has pledged to take major steps to reshape the nation's public health guidelines. Last week, for instance, Kennedy said he would immediately begin studying vaccine safety and efficacy, but promised, and this is important, to not take vaccines away from anybody. He also committed to formally recommending states and municipalities remove fluoride from public water. You know, I don't know enough about the fluoride issue to comment, but I find it interesting that among those who are passionate about it, they're super passionate about getting the fluoride out of the water. So yeah, I'm curious about that.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about, Anna. Yeah. First of all, the fact that he's saying I'm not gonna take vaccines away from anybody is reassuring, because that's the extreme scenario where this is a disaster, right? So, okay, we've eliminated at least one disaster. Doesn't mean we've eliminated all the disasters, okay? But I'm looking forward to an actual national conversation, and I'm looking forward to those scientists and doctors that I believed in my whole life and still believe in to this day, going out and proving that he's wrong. But you've got to do that. You can't just stay in a cave and go, we are going to just cancel him on mainstream media. We won't allow him on anything. We won't platform him. You can't not platform the nominee for Health and Human Services Secretary, right? Right. So you engage, win over the country. If you're right, which I think you are, please try to win over the country to your side. And you might even win some anti-vaxxers to your side, because guess what? They've never heard your side because you keep it hidden in a cave.
Right, they just assume that we should take their word for it without having to hear, any explanation or having them provide any evidence to basically debunk some of the claims that are being made. So you make a good point there. But Cenk, I am not naive, and I know that if he gets confirmed, things could go south. But there's also a possibility that a disruptor in this government agency could be a good thing. Because honestly, when I look at the FDA, for instance, there is a lot of corruption with the FDA. And by the way, we should all be asking, why is it that we live in a country that has all these regulations supposedly, but every week you hear about a listeria outbreak in our food, you hear about E. coli outbreaks. I mean, it just goes on and on. Food being recalled all the time because of these issues. And it's because of the lack of regulations that the FDA is totally willing to provide cover for, because they've got some cozy relationships with industry as well. And so when I read about how RFK Jr. will be tasked with rooting out corruption within this government agency, that kind of rhetoric excites me. And if they actually carry that out, I mean, that could be a legendary part of Donald Trump's administration. Now, that's if things go well. Okay. Obviously, I am not naive and things could really go poorly. We'll see.
So look, as with the entire Trump administration, it could go very poorly or interestingly positive in some ways, right? So here's what I mean by that. So, and I've got it at 75% going poorly, 25% with at least a little bit of a chance that it might go well. And maybe, anyways, let me just spit it out. So the way that it goes poorly is they start saying, okay, Bobby's conclusions are the conclusions, and we're not listening to 99% of the world's scientists or doctors, et cetera. And these are now things that we're enforcing, whether you like it or not. It's kind of the equivalent of what the right wing was worried about in taking away gas stoves and burgers and planes. Now that was all overly hyped. Gas stoves, tiny bit of truth. Plastic straws is totally true. Anyway, so that kind of stuff, we don't touch that, right? If the Trump administration does the same but opposite end of the spectrum, where they go, okay, now we're doing this, and you're not allowed to have vaccines, or you're not allowed to have seed oil, you're not allowed to have fluoride, et cetera, that's gonna be a holy mess. It's gonna be a giant, real, enormous problem for the health of this country, right? If on the other hand, he goes back to his roots as an environmental lawyer in holding corporations accountable, well, now we're having a conversation. Okay,
exactly, yeah.
So let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that. So he often talks about, and nobody ever listens to him except us, that the liability shield that vaccine companies, the drug companies have for their vaccines. I understand the logic of why they need that immunity from from suits, but I also understand the logic of challenging that immunity. And I think that's a super interesting conversation, and we've never really had that conversation nationally. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm not quite sure which side I'm gonna come out on, right? And I can't wait for the scientists to emerge out of their cave and actually make their point of view on this. And then the FDA, and Anna's right, when we live under corporate rule, there's nonstop like food poisoning and et cetera. Is Bobby going to be allowed to rein them in? Or is Trump gonna say, oh, no, those are our donors, shut up. You get back to your seed oils, okay? You're not allowed to touch corporate rule. If that happens, well, that exposes Trump to some degree.
Of course, yeah.
Right, and I'm gonna come back to why I have a little bit of faith in RFK Jr. Hold for that thought. But the last one, and there's many others, but my God, imagine if he said, and they're gonna say this is a little bit outside of his scope because this one's nuclear, but what if he said, you know what, as the head of HHS, I think we should negotiate drug prices, all drug prices. I think we have to, it's a health emergency, okay? Now that is the mother lode of corporate rule. They are the big, pharma is the biggest lobby in the country, and way bigger than AIPAC, way bigger than oil, than anything else. And they have us under their thumb, and they won't let us negotiate drug prices. They're robbing us blind. My God, if RFK Jr. does that, he walks away. He walks away at Kennedy in the lexicon of American politics. Now, I'm perfectly aware that he can go in the other direction. I just told you there's a 75% chance they go in the wrong direction. But if he goes in that direction, now we're having an entirely different conversation.
I gotta say, I know how much Trump supporters like to own the libs, like they live for it, and I get it. But can you imagine the ultimate owning the libs that the Trump administration could do? Because Biden desperately wanted people to believe that he was FDR 2.0. Can you imagine if Trump actually carries out the types of policies that would lead to people calling him FDR 2.0?
Are you kidding me? That's my entire plan.
That would be the ultimate own. Oh my God.
So guys, look, go check out the populist plank and sign that pledge on tyt.com. We'll have the link in the description box. One of the 6 things that I picked was negotiate all drug prices, okay? So, and I picked those 6 not because those are the 6 highest priorities I have. I picked those 6 because they are the ones that we all agree on. Populist left, populist right, average Americans, et cetera. They're pretty much indisputable, right? Money out of politics, anti-war, et cetera. So if Trump could check off 2, 3 out of that 6, I don't care about party labels.
No, me either.
And the Democrats have been yelling at me my whole life because I don't care about party labels.
And they'll keep doing it.
Right, so I know I'm not gonna support a Democrat if they're corporate stooges and they do nothing positive. And if Trump gives you, look, again, it's not likely, okay? I know his nature, I know his instincts, right? But if he goes in the right direction, am I gonna give him credit for that? Of course! And would he be owning the libs if he stole their policies, implemented them, and then became enormously popular? Of course, I mean, what do I care if Bernie does it or Trump does it? I just, or Biden does it. I'm happy to give anyone credit. Again, unlikely, but these are like, so now let's get to the 2 advantages of Trump and RFK Jr. We've talked endlessly about Trump's disadvantages. Have I changed my mind about those? No, not at all. His disadvantages are still a mountain and a giant problem.
Let's hold on that. Can I finish the rest of the story? Because there's more details I think are worth knowing about at least. So Kennedy has also floated significant employee turnover at public health agencies. He said in an interview with MSNBC that he would cut workers in the nutrition departments at the US Food and Drug Administration. While speaking at a conference in Arizona on Saturday, Kennedy proposed replacing 600 officials at the National Institutes of Health with hand-picked staff.
That's a little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no, look guys, you replace a couple of people because you want a diversity of thought. Oh my God, you replace 200 out of 600. Oof, I'm a little worried, right? But you get rid of everybody, you bring in everyone who agrees with you.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Then we don't have a diversity of opinion. We don't have that conversation we're looking forward to.
I agree with you on that, yeah. So Kennedy also told NPR after the election that Trump gave him 3 specific things to focus on. So what are those 3 things? Well, President Trump wants the corruption and the conflicts out of the regulatory agencies. He wants to return the agencies to the gold standard, empirically based, evidence-based science and medicine that they were once famous for. And he wants to end the chronic disease epidemic with measurable impacts on the diminishment of chronic disease within 2 years. And by the way, this is an interesting and shocking move. So, seeing as Trump's transition co-chair, Howard Lutnick, told Caitlin Collins just 2 weeks ago that RFK Jr. was not getting a job at the department. So let's take a look at that.
One other person who was on stage recently and was talking about coming into the administration is RFK Jr. He said that Trump has promised him control of the public health agencies, HHS, which would be also CDC, FDA, USDA, all of these agencies. Is that true? Has Trump promised him basically the HHS job?
So I spent 2.5 hours this week with Bobby Kennedy Jr. And it was the most extraordinary thing because let's face it, we've all heard on the news all sorts of sort of snarky comments about him. And I said, so tell me, how's it gonna go? And he said, why don't you just listen to me explain things? And what he explained was when he was born, we had 3 vaccines. And autism was 1 in 10,000. Now a baby's born with 76 vaccines because in 1986, they waived product liability for vaccines.
Okay,
I mean, his point is really interesting.
But
so here's what he
vaccines
said.
don't cause autism,
Okay,
which is what RFK pushes, which is why people are concerned that he could get a job like HHS. And I don't even think
he's not getting a job for HHS. What he's trying to do, here's what he wants to do. He said, I want data.
Looks like he might be getting a job at HHS if he gets confirmed. And by the way, now, according to CNN, Lutnick's answer set off an internal uproar in Trump's inner circle, with Trump making clear to Kennedy he'd be the one making the ultimate decisions.
Okay, yeah, so I love how cocky they are in mainstream media, and it turns out to be totally wrong. Okay, so now, the upside of Trump is twofold. One is he likes to be popular. Well, that's good news. Why don't you do popular things like paid family leave and lowering drug prices, etc., right? Now, remember, he had a first term to try to do this, and that's why I'm saying I'm skeptical. I think it's unlikely that he'll do this because he didn't do any of those popular things. He did giant corporate tax cuts. He did all these like weirdo strike back against his enemies stuff, and it just was obsessed with himself and never figured out how to be popular. And remember, he's surrounded by like the worst people on earth who all have their own different agendas. He's serving their agendas and it's making him less and less popular. So he can go down that spiral, and maybe, and likely he will go down that spiral. But there is a hope that he wants to be popular and is not going to run again, and hence will be a little bit unchained, which leads me to my second slight positive about Trump. We're no longer boxed in, guys. So now that chaos has significant danger, and that's why I was against Trump. But what sucks about corporate rule is everything was so regimented. You had to be exactly within these lines. And I never trusted the lines. And it was always some person that you never saw, oh, trust us, these are the rules, and you can't go past those rules, and you can't even have a discussion, and if you have a discussion, you're a terrible person, and we're gonna do a character assassination of you, right? So we're not boxed in anymore. And in some sense, God help us, right? Because there will be some, maybe a lot of chaos that is not positive that comes out of that. But since we're not boxed in, maybe at the end of Pandora's box is a little bit of hope. I know that's way too hopeful, right? But at the same time, it's not impossible anymore. And then the upside of RFK Jr. is at least he's not a fraud. Look, I massively disagree with him on a lot of things, and his position on Gaza is atrocious. Okay, and things that he's done in his personal life. Yeah, I definitely don't agree, but why do I care about his personal life? Why is that relevant to me? Why is that relevant to you, right? So I know we're supposed to hate him because of his personal life, but sorry, it's just not relevant to me. If I was his cousin, then maybe it's super relevant to me, but I'm not. So a lot of people in Trump's administration, I think, are frauds. I think JD Vance is a fraud. I think Tulsi Gabbard's a fraud, and I can go on. But at least RFK Jr. is not in the fraud category. You might have him in the dangerous category. You might have him in the wacky category, but I don't have him in the fraud category. That means you can have a conversation, okay?
Yeah.
And so let's see what happens. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.